The journey is painful, but if it's not painful, you're not growing. And to just stay with it and grow through it, get closer to the Most High. And I'd also like to encourage the daughters to seek out a mentor, an older woman that'll teach you, because a lot of the younger ones, they're not looking for it. They know it all, and it's part of the generation. I got this. They don't, you offer or whatever to help, and it's not received a lot.
So what's the biggest impact that Straitway, being a part of Straitway, have had on your life in all these 20 years that you've been here?
Wow. Just being able to see myself, with the preaching and stuff like that, as far as spiritually, otherwise I wouldn't know who I was. Physically, for instance, the wreck that we were in, out there, we had to get to physical therapy 3 times a week if I didn't have, if Elder and I didn't have a ride, meals being provided. I would have had, somebody cooking meals, all that stuff, laundry, all that people were there taking care of our fire. Laundry was all taken care of, meals, dishes done, house cleaning, rides to therapy. Family ain't gonna do that for you, or they'll do it for a little while, and then they get tired of it, or you gotta pay them for it. Or deliverance, are always there to help with deliverance. Just being a friend, just somebody there all the time, just because we live so close to each other.
Everybody's inquiring, how did Straitway come about? How did we get to this point? And they can tell and sense that it's like something is catching fire. It's growing, because they can see the happiness, they can see the joy, they see the peace that is being obtained. They can see we're very serious about this walk.
Thank you so much, Elder Becker, for being on the Berean Moment show. I really appreciate that.
It's my honor and privilege.
Hallelujah. Wanted to ask you if you can just give us a flyby of what your life was like before you had your Berean Moment. Just, if you can just give us a feel from your childhood to the moment before you had your Berean Moment.
Sure, I'll try to keep it short because it get pretty deep. But I was born and raised in Minnesota. I was out in the rural part of the country out there, a little small town, 1,100 people. Went through my school years there. Graduated from a high school that 7th through 12th grade consisted of 560 students, so our graduating class was less than 60.
Wow, okay.
So we all pretty close. Everybody's pretty close in school. Went on that, did the odd jobs, did a lot of work for the local farmers, and soon after high school, 6 years later, I married a local girl. Her dad was a dairy farmer, so I had a lot of interaction on the farm. And both my parents came out of the farming environment. They were both out in the country, raised in rural Minnesota as well. So grew up on a lake. I was really grateful for that. I got 6 brothers and 1 sister. Okay. Well, 6 brothers including me, so okay. 5 plus my only sister.
Where are you in that number?
I'm actually technically 3rd because I'm an identical twin.
Oh.
But my twin brother is like 30 minutes older than I am. So,
okay.
Yeah. So.
You and I have the same situation. I'm a twin, and I come from a family of 5 brothers and 1 sister too.
Ain't that something?
Yeah, but I'm number 5. So, but
you number 5.
Yeah. But this is cool. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So we were identical twins, and we had more of a better relationship after high school than we did at high school. He had his venues, I had mine, I had my interest, he had his. It was like, Actually, thinking back on it, was rather strange that, but I always go back to the Bible talking about the elder's going to serve the younger, right? And that's actually what it came down to with him. He's into Christianity. He believes that, that once saved, always saved type of thing. So we had our discussions over the year that went mute. It never produced anything, so he just stopped. But I married a farm girl. I did a full-time job. I would get home in the evenings. I would go right over to the farm. I would help milk or bale hay or whatever the case may be. And I did it as a trade type of service, right? So I would work for my father-in-law, and then I would get free beef out of the deal, or back then free pork or whatever the case may be. Just keep. So it was a good deal. It was a good mutual working relationship. I never went on to extra school after high school. I was the type of man that, my job, I was on the actual work program in school when I was 16, so when I had my license. In fact, it was 15, and my first job paid me $3.25 an hour at a ice cream distribution plant. So I would walk there after school, and then I would get a ride home. I've always been that kind of guy. I just didn't have an interest of going on to, additional education after school. So I always loved to work with my hands, always liked to figure things out, whatever I had in front of me. I got married in 1984 to the girl that I dated through high school. We had 2 children, moved to a local town that was a little bit bigger, still near our hometown. And just raised our family, we had a travel business together. She was a travel agent, still is today. We opened that business. It was actually really successful, and they're still going strong. It's been since mid-90s. Raised our 2 children, did all the things that a family does. The soccer thing, the hockey thing. Whatever the outdoors had to offer, we were doing it. Camping, just family stuff. So. Worked for different, companies, mostly in the manufacturing field. I stayed with that almost the entirety of my life. Besides the farm work, that's pretty much it right there.
Let me ask you. So what was the spiritual condition of your family before? I mean, in your childhood, or even all the way up? Did you guys have you say your brother's a Christian, but did you guys grow up in a Christian family? Was it strong? Was it average?
No, we grew up in a church family. My folks were strictly Catholic.
Okay.
The whole background on my mother's side and my father's side were Catholic. That's all they knew. So we were indoctrinated as much as you could as children into the Catholic way. We went to, in fact, when I was very young, we moved from a suburb in the city out to the country, okay? And there was a Catholic parochial school out there, and they tried to enroll all of the children in there, and they didn't have the room at the school, so we went to catechism classes every day after school and learned all the sacraments and the rites, and we're just a good Catholic family. It is the image in the community, mom and dad, and they got to be good people, and all the children got to show up and be in the pews and be quiet, and so we just kind of went with it. But as I got older, of course, going through the teenage years, there was always something there that just didn't feel right about it. It was very boring. It didn't edify. God is this thing, and the Holy Spirit is this white dove coming down, and all the images that the Catholic Church portrays for you. But yeah, my parents actually got more devout in it. My dad, he actually was in a prayer group, so every middle of the week he would get up and they would do this prayer, like he'd have to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning. He prayed till 4 o'clock. Don't ask me about it. I don't know. He was pretty private. He was always been a pretty private individual as well as personal life, but they did all the Catholic things. And me and my brothers, and when we got older, we got into our 20s. The Catholic Church was back here. It wasn't. There was an image to it. You had to show like you were a good person. Because I'll tell you what, my father, as far as it comes to honesty, I've never met a man more honest than him. I mean, to the point where, the IRS, he owes them a penny, he'll drive there to give them their penny, right? He's just that kind of individual. But they expected their children to reflect their parenting, okay? So we tried to do our best, and we would show up for the Christmas, we show up to the Easter, and we felt good about ourselves and actually believed that this is enough to, because we're good people, we're going to get into heaven, right? That's all you had to do was go, to church every Sunday. So then after I got married, my wife, she came out of a Catholic background as well. I mean, that was the biggest church in the town I grew up in, of 1,100 people. Everybody went to that Catholic church, so. They had a really good community as far as a solid community of Catholics there, so they had good support for one another. And then when I got married again, we had children, we started raising them up in the Catholic thing, because that's all we knew, that was enough, again. That was enough to make you feel righteous and, as much as you understood, and get us, hopefully, into heaven when we were all, because we were good people, right? So, but then, over the course of that, there was always something. There was always interactions throughout my entire life. I would even pray, I didn't understand what I was doing and praying, and it wasn't like the Catholics prayed. It wasn't. Going to a Catholic church was so, it was so robotic, right? If I can use that word, that you could actually sit there and just recite everything that they would say before they said it, because, it's just part of it. But I had a relationship with God that I didn't understand way back then. I would be troubled about something, or, and if I got into trouble, oh, please, God, never let this happen again, and that's kind of. And now that I can reflect back, of course, and look back, I can see where He brought me through and how He preserved me through a lot of this stuff. And
so you pretty much was heavy in the Roman Catholic Church. That was your tradition. That was your
tradition.
Your I guess the extent of your religious background and everything. Yeah. So when did you start being coming into truth or having your Berean moment? If you can please share.
Oh, absolutely. I actually recall pretty vividly the things that happened in my life. Early on, when I was in my very early teens, I had been working with somebody, right? It was a side job. I used to bale hay and stuff on the side. I had been working with somebody that, it was an older man that was helping us, the younger, because we were, 12 or 13, he was on the hay rack with us, and he would talk to me about Jesus and stuff. And back then, there was a stigma, right? So if you weren't in church hearing about Jesus and you were outside the church doors, it was like, this ain't good, because this just stays in the building, right? You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so, he'd start talking about Jesus, and, do I know Jesus? Do I read the Bible? And use the colloquial term that they used back then, this man's a Jesus freak, it's just like, he's got like some kind of disease type of thing. So I heard some of the stuff from it. I really didn't retain it, but I can remember that was really my first encounter. And then I got a job. Out of high school, I worked for one place for almost 12 years, on and off as the job went. But in that place, there was a man there that was also labeled the Jesus freak, like the weirdo that everybody stayed away from. Like he's one of them religious guys, and don't get too close to him. He might rub off on you, type of thing. So through the way things worked, once in a while we would interact. He would try little things with me and go fishing a little bit. And I was like, get that, not now. It's not a good time. And in the course of that same company, there was a situation where they had a carpenter that they hired. He was a handyman type of guy. And he came in, they had to do some building up in the mezzanine and put some walls up. So out of all the people in the plant, they chose me to go up there and help this guy. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, whatever. It's, part of the, job description. So I was up there, and I was scheduled to help him for like 2 weeks. Well, over the course of the 2 weeks, he started getting more open and talking to me about, and his approach, he was a Christian, right? Just total Christian. But he, slowly talked to me about it. And the thing that I remember about him is that he didn't really try to push anything. He would just put things out there and see how I would react. And then I started asking more questions, because I had this private environment with this man. And I could tell that he was going to keep what happened, our exchange, from, because my God, if they get out to the other people, phew. Anyway, so, and over the time, he turned me on to Chick magazine, Chick publications out in California, Jack Chick, and that kind of thing. Gave me a bunch of big folder and stuff, and said if you ever need anything, I'd go ahead and call him. So, and then that was like, wow, that was like, no, this is really weird. I'm into this Jesus stuff. Wow, it's like, okay, this is really like strange. And I even remember people would come to me and want to talk to me about religious stuff. And I don't know nothing about this stuff, growing up. It's like, in my teenage years and in my early 20s, and I'm just, a Catholic guy, right? But so at this job, I moved up in the ranks at the job. I was out on the floor manufacturing. They put me up in the front, and I became a draftsman. That's where I got my start in draftsman, and that was in the late 80s, okay? But they put me right next to the weird guy. All right, the really Christian, the Jesus freak guy, and we had cubicles right across from each other. We were in the back corner, so the whole rest, we were isolated from everybody else. So we struck up a relationship, I saw that he wasn't the guy to stay away from, and he was he was very, how do you want to say it? He was careful about how he approached me about this stuff because, he scared everybody else away. So he was, but again, like the same thing that happened to the carpenter in the mezzanine, I started to ask him questions. Well, him and I used to hang out every day and play backgammon. So we would talk more and more and more and more. And I still wasn't ready to budge yet, though. Something wasn't, because I had the world yet, and I had my life in front of me, and I had a family, and, I saw what his life consisted of and what, the dislike people had for him, and I didn't want to put myself in the same position. So I ended up getting laid off because the company ended up closing its doors. Well, we didn't talk for about a year or two after that, right? And then one day he just looked me up, and I'm like, okay, whatever, because he needed help cutting wood, and he knew that I knew all the skills for doing that chainsaw work. So, yeah, come on out, and I'm like, okay, I wonder what this guy's going to say. It's like, okay, it's been a couple years, and I was back into my lifestyle, not thinking about everything we talked about, but slowly, over the course of that year, we kept in contact. And the more that I spoke to him about it, the more that our conversations consisted of, the Bible and understanding the Bible. And incidentally, he was actually part of another ministry at that time. Okay. Actually, the Overcomer. Okay. And so he knew about the Sabbath and everything else. Wow. And all this stuff was completely foreign coming out of a Catholic church. But you could start to see the tension rising in the house because I started to grow more interested in it. And then one day, I'll never forget it. It was the middle of January in '97. And in Minnesota, it was over 30 degrees below zero. It was a really cold week in the middle of January. And I just had this heaviness on my shoulder, like an undescribable weight, Just I couldn't even today that duplicate it or have duplicated for somebody. It was like the whole world was on top of me. And I just like, God, what is going on here, And it just, right? And so I was working on a project in the house, and I had a detached garage. So every time I needed something, I had to go out to the garage and get it. And I just wore my jeans and a white T-shirt, I'm just going from the house out to the garage. I ain't going to freeze. But I had that heavy weight on me, and I just couldn't comprehend what it really was. And I started walking out to the garage, which is probably 50 feet from my house, and I had a big old snowbank from plowing snow. And I just dropped to my knees and started repenting for everything that I could think of, and tears were coming, and it probably went for, I didn't care then. It was like, it was a moonlit night. It is in snow, you can see everything. I'm thinking, at the time I didn't think anything. I was just repenting and crying and doing all the thing I knew, and I must have went 20 minutes, half hour out there. I didn't feel no cold or anything, right? I was in my own little world, and all of a sudden I just like, dang, what in the world am I doing? I'm out here and it's 30-something below zero, and I'm out here in a T-shirt, and I wonder if everybody saw me. The spirit of the world started coming back in. So I got up and I went back in the garage, and I tried to, get back on my knees and start repenting, and it just wasn't the same. Wow. So I walked back in the house, and I just had the what just happened experience, God, this is crazy. This is like, what? Just what happened. I didn't say nothing to my wife. I didn't say nothing to my children. I didn't feel any different when I got up. I just knew that something happened. I didn't know it. So the next morning, when I got up, it was like I got out of bed, honestly, and it felt like I was 3 feet off the ground.
Wow.
It was like I was walking above the floor, right? Because all that sin and everything that I had on me that I confessed and repented of was removed in that night. And I've never felt that light in my life. It was undescribable. But today I understand that all the sin that was weighing down me and all the wickedness had been lifted and taken away by the blood of Jesus.
So when you came into the truth, you basically, this guy that at your work kind of introduced you. So what you call it, the ministry he was a part of, the
Overcomer.
Overcomer. Did you eventually join that ministry? Or
Yes, as a matter of fact, yeah. And after I really started, when Yeshua came into my life, right, I let him know right away. I called that man, and I let him know, and of course he was ecstatic. So we started fellowshipping Sabbath, and I was listening to the Overcomer every Sabbath. I went to his house, and that was all new to me, but I knew it was right. I didn't even know what the Sabbath was until all this stuff got revealed to me. So that was pretty much my road there.
Did your family, did your wife and your children go along with you with that as well?
Actually, my wife, no, that was instant kick, right? Because
even with the
my first wife in Minnesota, that was. Because this was a different man, right? Okay, all of a sudden I'm completely changed. She doesn't know how to adapt. She doesn't know how to receive it. At first she was like, hey, this is kind of cool, because we had a good friend that was a Christian, right? And she would talk about Jesus, but she was private about it. She didn't try to push it on you or anything, but she was also a party person. She was in the world. She had every foot in the world thinking she was saved. So that was acceptable to my first wife, but this was different for her because, I was keeping this Old Testament stuff that didn't exist back then. It was like, the Gospel of John according to the Catholic Church type of thing, and that was all gone. And I was talking about these feast days and all this stuff that was totally foreign to her. And of course, she started to feel threatened. And like anybody does, when you feel that kind of excitement, the first people you want to tell is your family, right? And so, I probably was a little bit too heavy in the beginning because of the excitement, and there was instant backlash to that. So that pretty much went through, the remainder of our time we were together. But my children. I would demand they would go with me on the Sabbath, and she never had a problem or issue. I didn't care if she did. I would just take them and we'd go, and the time I was there, they got to hear the word, they got to listen to the preaching. So I was able to put a lot of things in them before Yashi called me this way.
So did your when you was going, your wife was not participating in this stuff?
No.
She was giving me kickback, but you guys are still married. You guys are still at least dwelling with together. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you go from the ministry that you was part of to get to Straitway? How did that come about?
Okay, that came to the Overcomer too as well. There was a lot of people. Now, of course, the Overcomer was a community. They were a community.
Living on community,
in a community structure under R.G. Stair. And they had a very well defined community. They proved they knew what they were doing. It was a good, solid community environment.
Did you live on community as well?
No, I didn't. I was still in Minnesota. Still, at that time, I had removed myself from the house, and I was. In fact, I think I put this in my video, a community video I did back a year or two ago. But I actually lived in in the back of my pickup for 7 months.
Wow.
Yeah, I had no place to go, so I took all my belongings and I kept my job and got a place to shower and everything. But I was that determined that I was going to keep in this way because I knew it was right. I couldn't explain it all, but I just knew it was right. So things worked out that I met a whole bunch of people from Minnesota, right? And this guy that had talked to me about the Most High, about Jesus back before I got born again. He had a brother that he was able to minister to, and then we had other people, and even my wife Diane. Now, she was part of that group down there. So we went to a meeting down there. I think it was for Passover, down to the Overcomer, and that's the first time I met Pastor Dow down there. And he was there at the meeting. Well, I didn't get to speak to him personally. Just the first time I actually seen him. But the thing was, is Brother Stair, R.G. Stair would preach continually about being on a community. That's the thing you need to do, right? And so the people that I was with from Minnesota, that was their ambition. They want to be part of a community. But with R.G. Stair, he had 5 of them under his jurisdiction back then, 6 of them or something like that. Maybe 7 in Upstart, 1 in Maine. But and the group of the nucleus of these Minnesota people somehow were focused on Pastor Dow, right? I mean, if I look back now, I can even tell that there was a difference with Pastor Dow way back then from all the other people that was a part of that overcomer, you know, from R.G. Stair down to all the other pastors and ministers. There was a different, he carried himself differently. There was a different spirit about him, you know, and now, of course, after the fact, we know why, because y'all had different footsteps for him, but they were gravitating towards going to, you know, if it was going to be a community and God brought us that way, it was going to be Straitway. Because again, there was something different about Pastor Dow back then, and his conduct, his confidence, his boldness, and everything he carried himself in a different manner. So they were actually, I'm sorry.
Was R.J. Stair, was it mostly a white? I mean, what was the diversity when it came to his ministry?
It was like you see here. Yeah, it was very diverse.
Okay.
There was, as far as I recall, there was, just about every flavor that you want. So it was like, and that raised like I was in an all-white Catholic environment. I was raised in an all-white Catholic town, and nobody. And racism wasn't really existent where I lived. So, when we started getting black folk moving out there, they actually had exchange students, and they were celebrities. They actually were, because that was a cultural shock for us, man. We're a bunch of white farm boys, right? So it didn't, it was like you go from an all-white Catholic church and you got a mixed congregation like that. I mean, it was really beautiful, honestly. So the people from Minnesota that they were gravitating, they all want to get on part of the community because they knew it was the right thing to do. We were listening to R.G. Stair, how he would direct things, and he's the one that, was the overseer, so to speak, And so after Pastor got the community established here, these people actually ended up getting added to the community. I was still out there in Minnesota, and what I would do is come down here for some working visits. And spend a weekend with them, just get to know, because even back then there was careful who was added. And so I did 2 or 3 working visits, if I remember right. They were actually working on what is now Pastor Dow's home. It was a fellowship hall back then. And I had some decent carpentry skills. I had a lot of plumbing, not electrical, but plumbing and some other skills that I could work well with my hands. And these people moved to the community here. The door was open to them. And my wife, Diane, was even moved here too. And so it was about 8 months after that I got a letter from Pastor Dow telling me that, that it was all right for me to get my affairs in order, and he wanted me down at the community. And so that was in November of 2000.
Now, were you married to Diane?
No.
Okay, so she was a part of that group too as well.
Yeah, we actually knew each other prior to her coming down here. So And when I got here, there was a pretty core group of Minnesotans that were here. So, the fellowship, I knew people here already. Of course, we did things a lot differently back then, but it was more of an easier transition. And today, there was 13 or 14 individuals that came down here from Minnesota and Diane are that remain.
Wow. So that was a large group that came down here.
Yeah.
So how did you guys listen to me now? We're talking about this is when did you came in 2000, early 2000 or 90s?
November 2000.
2000. So when you came in, how did you get? I mean, did they have YouTube? They didn't even have YouTube back then. So how did you guys were able to follow Pastor Dow from a long distance?
Actually, we really didn't, because Pastor really didn't have the ministry platform then.
Okay.
I mean, they were in a local city here where he would do the preaching in the basement, but I would still be listening to The Overcomer on Shabbat by shortwave radio.
Okay.
So, I mean, I went to a meeting in Louisville that Pastor spoke at, and I think that's the first time I introduced myself. Again, we never had any formal conversations. The focus then was on R.G. Stair.
Okay.
Because he was the man leading all this up, and everybody else was support.
Okay.
And I never, the only time I really talked to Pastor Dow personally was when I came here for my working visits, because even then they would, check people out, make sure the spirit was right for this.
Okay.
But and then things evolved, and again, he asked me to come down here, and that's why I'm here today.
Okay. So you had your Berean Moment. You felt called to come. You said you felt called to come to be a part of Straitway because you got to visit. Pastor Dow invited you.
Yeah, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was using these other people that from Minnesota to actually lead me this way, because I think I did it on my testimony in the 17 years video I did, but R.G. Stair put it out there. If you really want to become part of a community, and even though I understood the cost back then, what it was, my family and everything else, I knew it was right, because it just was. You don't even have, even though I didn't know the word like I do now, it was just, there was something spiritually right about it. You could see the unity and everything. So he said that, I want you to send me everything that you have right now, okay? And I took him for real. I took it at face value. I pulled out my savings, everything that I had, and I was trusting completely by faith that I didn't know which way I was going to go. I didn't know if I was going there or anywhere, if I was going anywhere, but I packaged it up and I sent it to him, right?